Live on YouTube. All right.
Alyssa Bond. I know her.
Okay, and let me disable the waiting room too while we're at it. Thanks for everyone being patient. Okay, there's no more waiting room. And we are live. Okay, y'all, so I'll just go ahead and begin. It's 1:02. Again, I'm just gonna share my screen. For whatever reason you can't see my screen, let me know and I will figure out this tech stuff. 1 second. Okay, can everyone see my screen okay? Okay, so I'm also gonna practice talking a little bit slower so that we can make sure that our interpreters are able to then communicate this information out. So welcome everyone. My name is Ashia Auberg and I am on the staff of SIFPAC and will be leading the slides today before Liz gets into her presentation. So welcome to the 16th Annual Chicago Food Justice Summit. These slides will just go over everything that we should know in terms of ensuring that accessibility is available for everyone. So again, we have Spanish interpretation going on today. So if you need any Spanish interpreting, there is a button at the bottom of the Zoom link that says interpretation with a little globe symbol on it. And you can click the language that you prefer for this session. We also have closed captioning services. So if you want to have closed captioning available, again, there's also a button at the bottom of this Zoom that allows for those services to come up. So we are using Hova this year, which is a little different of a platform from what we typically have used. As you all probably already know, since you're in this Zoom, it is integrated with Zoom. The only difference is that Hova allows for a bit more flexibility in terms of being able to chat, as well as post questions in the Q&A session, and as well learn more about our speaker through the session page. So again, feel free to use Hova or Zoom chat today interchangeably. We'll be checking both for questions. So again, here's some buttons just to make sure that folks are familiar with all the different pieces of technology today on Zoom. So it's optional if you want to show your video today, although of course we always encourage it. We do ask for all participants to mute themselves unless we get to the Q&A section and you'd like to vocalize your question. Also, if you scroll at the bottom, you'll see the chat box. So again, feel free to use either that chat box today or the chat in Hova. And again, I kind of discussed it earlier, but we do have live transcription that you can feel free to use. And then just for accessibility purposes, if folks need anything, feel free to privately direct message me or ping the whole group or ping whoever has a team on their name today. Feel free to connect with us if you have any questions about anything accessibility or translation related. And then of course, we want to encourage folks to rename themselves. You can do that by toggling over your name, and there's like 3 little dots, and you can just change your name and add your desired pronouns. And then again, kind of just discussing that you can enter this session today through Zoom or Hova, completely optional. You'll view the same session no matter which button you choose. And then, of course, when entering the chat, if for whatever reason you can't hear speakers or interpreters, it may be the situation where you just need to exit, come back in, and click join by audio to make sure that you can hear everything properly. And then of course, I kind of mentioned earlier, but Hova allows for a lot of engagement. So feel free to use that chat, use polls, use the Q&A portion. There are also some community boards that have gotten started. So feel free to just interact with Hova throughout the session. And then again, the community boards, feel free to interact with those as well or start your own. And then again, just want to make another point about the A-team being available if we have any questions, or feel free to direct message myself. Okay, and that is it for me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass it over to Liz. I think you may be muted still, Liz. Perfect.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Liz Abuno. I am the owner and operator of 40 Acres Fresh Market. First, I want to say thank you for joining this session today. It's kind of cool that people think that I have interesting things to say or kind of want to join in this discussion. So I'm super happy that you all joined. I don't want to talk at you for 90 minutes. I hate when that happens to me. So I'm going to do probably about 30 to 35 minutes of a presentation and then open it up to a really robust Q&A and kind of ideation session as we kind of talk through this idea of building and scaling commercial food ventures to improve food access in Black communities. Okay, are we ready? Yep. All right. I'm going to share my screen. Can you guys excuse me and give me 1 second? There's some background noise that I just need to, take care of. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm ready. So today, just a little agenda. I'm gonna give you a little intro to me, just so you can be more familiar with who's leading the session. I have a short video. Then I want to get into food access, especially the food access picture in Chicago, and what this looks like for Black grocers and food businesses. And then a little bit of history of 40 Acres. And yeah, and then into like how I have built 40 Acres into where we are today, which is on the precipice of developing and building our first brick and mortar store. So I'm sharing my screen, so I have to, okay. So I am actually not originally from Chicago. I am from upstate New York, born and raised. I moved to Chicago in 2012. Before moving here in 2012, I went to Cornell University from 1998 and graduated in 2002. After Cornell, you see that big G there, I worked for General Mills for just shy of 10 years. And in General Mills, I worked in consumer food sales. And that meant that grocery stores were my customers. We're talking some really large major grocers like Super Value, Publix, Del Hayes over on the East Coast. And then I decided I was completely sick of the grocery industry. I did not want to be in CPG or anywhere near groceries again, ever in my life. So I went to the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, started in 2012, graduated in 2014, with the goal of pivoting my career to try to find something in corporate responsibility or corporate sustainability, because I really liked this intersection of business and social impact. After graduating from business school, I worked briefly at a social entrepreneurship nonprofit, but decided that I really wasn't for me, didn't like it. So went back into corporate at Microsoft for almost 2.5 years. And it was okay. Microsoft was pretty decent. But during my tenure at Microsoft, the ideas for 40 Acres Fresh Market started percolating in my head. And so when the organization had a reorg, and my job was eliminated, I decided to kind of take the severance and run and go start my own business. And the pizza in the corner is because I am from New York. And I'm going to say something really controversial. Deep dish is delicious, but it's not real pizza. It is casserole, real pizza folds. That is pizza in the corner. Okay. There we go. And I wanted to kind of give you guys this video that's that I did about almost 2 years ago, talking about even how I got the idea for finding 40 Acres, and like this, sometimes that there's defining moments that change the trajectory or the course of where we think we're going personally, professionally. And this is me discussing my aha moment.
It was really accidental. I didn't mean to find Austin. One day I had an errand to run and it said it was on Chicago Ave. And of course I look around and you see the vacant lots. You see vacant storefronts. And that's when I was like, Toto, we ain't in Kansas anymore, because where the heck is the grocery store? And it just dawned on me that the basic goods and services and amenities that I expect to find in a neighborhood, I couldn't easily access here. And then I look around and I'm like, okay, this is a predominantly Black neighborhood. Everybody here looks like me, but the things that I'm used to seeing in neighborhoods where nobody looks like me don't exist here. And it was a clear delineation. It was the first time I saw for sure that tale of two cities. And I didn't like it.
Oops. So I just realized that I forgot to preface that video by saying that there aren't closed captions. So I am sincerely hoping that if anybody wasn't able to hear, that the translator was able to pick up some of that, but I can easily recap. And that what I was saying is that I stepped off the number 66 bus at Chicago and Laramie and could not find a bank, a grocery store, or a pharmacy when I wanted to pull out cash. I'm really not a fan of ATM fees, and corner store ATM fees are horrific. So I was trying to find cheap ways to get my money and couldn't find some basic goods and services on this major commercial corridor in a Black neighborhood. And that was like my aha moment of, wait a second, this does not look like the Chicago that I know in the neighborhoods that I've been in, which also happen to be predominantly white. So why is there this chasm of access between the two between these neighborhoods? So kind of wanted to give you an example of what this looks like here in Chicago. So I pulled this from the Austin Community Food Co-op's Instagram page, because I thought it was just a really great infographic to show Austin, which is home to over 90,000 residents, currently only has 2 full-service grocery stores that are more than 2 miles apart from each other. Meanwhile, Lincoln Park on the north side is home to about 1/3 less residents, and they have more than 10 grocery stores. So 5 times the number of grocery stores for 33% fewer people. And we can see in these demographics that it's almost completely flipped on its head. Austin, 79% Black, Lincoln Park, 79% white. Austin is 5% white, Lincoln Park is 5% Black, with a lot of Hispanic diversity. And, you know, Austin has a lot of Hispanic diversity coming into the community area as well. Almost 3 times the percentage of households in Austin are below that 2x the poverty line threshold. So we do have a higher concentration of poverty in Austin, but still a decent median income at $33,000. But, you know, that's 3 times less than what you're seeing in Lincoln Park at over $100,000 in median household income. Now, obviously, you know, with more income comes more ability to more purchasing power. However, people still need to eat. Austin still has an incredible amount of purchasing power. So while Austin might have fewer grocery stores than Lincoln Park, or maybe a different kind of food access picture, what we're seeing is way off balance to what these numbers are showing us. And then it's not just the number of stores, it's also what we find in stores in our community. So this actually comes from these pictures come from a store audit that I did in the Austin community when I first started or was thinking about starting 40 Acres. I wanted to see, well, what stores are in Austin and what do they have to offer when it comes to affordable fresh food? And what I saw was stores that either had nothing, or what stores did have, as you can see, wilted yellowing greens, empty, kind of unattended coolers made for not very much produce. Stores smelled bad. Product wasn't sanitarily displayed. You see a lot of just like a sack of potatoes on the floor for people to pick from. Just basically a take what you can get type of merchandising. And then I went over to the Pizza in Oak Park and I would see bins teeming, full, more full than anybody could ever grab of, you know, fresh produce and affordable pricing. I mean, you're looking at here, I think I'd taken a picture of bell peppers at, you know, you could buy 3 for 99 cents, which is pretty crazy. And especially having this type of pricing, this type of abundance, this type of affordability in even a more affluent area. So what's the impact of not having affordable fresh food readily accessible in a neighborhood? I did a community snapshot of North Lawndale. North Lawndale currently has only 1 full service grocery store in a community area of almost 20,000 people. And as we know, diet and nutrition are foundational to a person's health. What we eat affects how healthy we are, and how healthy we are impacts everything from our ability to learn, our ability to work, our ability to provide for ourselves. Right now, about 53% of adults in North Lawndale are categorized as overweight or obese. 45% of women are diagnosed with high blood pressure. And in 2017, Sinai Community Health, the North Lawndale residents, people are making these connections between food and their health. They are understanding that their built environment is not one that is conducive to sustaining a healthy lifestyle. One resident said, "There's nowhere to buy healthy food. You have to go on 2 or 3 buses to find vegetables." And this idea that we cannot get the sustenance we need from the neighborhoods in which we live has been normalized in this term food desert. And the implication of a desert brings to mind some naturally occurring environment when this is not natural. This is not normative, and we should not think of this as normal. This is the work of years of policy, development decisions, and neglect. So a lot of people have recognized the situation for what it is. And there's been decades of, well, why don't we just open our own grocery stores? Why don't Black people just farm their own food, do their own farmers markets? I want to give you a picture of what this landscape looks like. When 40 Acres started in 2018, it was estimated that there were fewer than 10 Black-owned supermarkets in the nation. At that time, there had been, in the last 10 years before that, there had been recent closures of stores. For example, Apples and Oranges in Baltimore opened their doors and closed in less than 2 years. Farmer's Best Market, I don't know if any of you remember this. It was on the south side of Chicago, bordering the Back of the Yards neighborhood. And that market lasted from 2008 to 2009. Sterling Farms in New Orleans lasted a little over a year. Calhoun's, which was a Black-owned grocery chain in Alabama, and I think they still exist, but they closed numerous locations prior to 2018. And a group in Greensboro, North Carolina, worked for nearly 10 years to open up a community co-op that closed in under 2 years. So what this tells us is that there's like a really, really rough landscape for grocery, and that Black grocers have fallen prey to that. So it's not as though there haven't been efforts to open up Black-owned grocery stores to fill this gap, but many of them haven't been able to be sustained. So why are food businesses so difficult to build and sustain? Well, so here's some of the roadblocks. They're capital intensive. Getting space, enough space for a building. There's rental costs. There's often renovation costs, as you have to upgrade the electrical systems to accommodate the level of refrigeration that grocery needs, HVAC systems, increased plumbing for drainage for refrigeration. The equipment itself is very expensive, and it can be a very labor-intensive business, and labor is a very major cost input. The unit economics of grocery, it's a low margin business. As you know, food is not extremely expensive to buy, relatively speaking, to items like electronics or a car. So stores are not making a huge margin off of one product sold. How they make their money is off of high volume. So you have to sell a lot of groceries to be profitable. It's said that some of your major chains need $400,000 a week in revenue in order to just keep their doors open. And then there's also an issue of capacity in terms of building these businesses. Because so many grocers have closed over the years, and a lot of Black independent grocers from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s that were sustaining our communities during segregation didn't remain open for many reasons. Some of them sold out to, and I don't want to say sold out, but they sold their businesses to larger players, and which they have every right to do. They were like, here's an opportunity. I can provide for my family even better, and somebody else can own this and carry this on. And obviously they didn't get carried on. Or a lot of succession planning is difficult. If there's no one to leave the business to, you have to close. And over time, what happened is that the people in the community that knew how to run grocery are no longer there. So you need people with the time to build these businesses, and you need people. You need a lot of people to run these businesses. There's a lot of labor involved, as I said, and you need resources. Money is the big one. Capital is a huge one. You need land resources. You need supplier resources. So do you have the capacity within the community to build up this business from scratch where none exists? And then the big thing, like I was just mentioning, is this expertise that has kind of died out. This is not a business for the faint of heart. You have to understand some pretty complex business functions like supply chain, inventory management, real estate development, marketing. And if people don't have that expertise, it takes years in this industry to gain it. So there's not necessarily a pool of people that you can just go to and find Black experts in the grocery industry. So those are some roadblocks that we're currently facing, but that doesn't mean that people aren't trying. So some solutions have been mobile grocery markets. So many of you are probably familiar with Urban Growers Collective and their Fresh Moves bus, transforming a CTA bus into a market on wheels that can go from neighborhood to neighborhood and provide that food access for people who need it. Both Maywood and North Lawndale at the farm in Ogden and PCC Wellness in Austin. Windy City Harvest has done an amazing job of partnering with medical institutions for food as medicine programs. And VeggieRx gives people not only produce within a program of learning how to eat healthier and prepare healthy foods, but also provides expanded buying power through their Produce Perks and VeggieRx coupons program. That also lets people have that agency in purchasing their own food. There's urban farms like Urban Canopy and PCC Austin Farm, also run by Windy City Harvest, that are providing food, space for people to grow their own food, as well as selling their excess back to the community in terms of farm stands. And then one of our favorite models is pop-up markets. This is a picture of Austin Fresh Market run by the students of By the Hand Club. And that's basically taking existing neighborhood space and making temporary markets so that people can have space to shop. The question then becomes, are these models sustainable and are they scalable? Can they grow from their current iterations into something more permanent that that's able to function off of its own revenue? Because this session isn't simply about plugging food access holes. It's really about the commercial space for that. And one of the things that comes as part of sustainability is, can you attract enough people to use their own resources and spending resources with your business so that you can run off your own revenue? And as it stands, as far as I know, with these models right now, they're heavily subsidized. And that is absolutely awesome that there is funding out there, but that also presents higher risk in case, like, if major funding sources either dry up, go away, or have to shift funds, that can really put food access programs in jeopardy if they're not able to sustain the level of funding that subsidizes their operations. So, as I said, I own 40 Acres Fresh Market. And so 40 Acres Fresh Market is coming into this space with the idea of building a commercial food enterprise, a grocery store in the Austin community. We want to be part of the community's permanent infrastructure, and we want to do that in the form of a small business that has the potential to grow and scale. So I am the owner, so we're Black woman owned, and right now we increase access to affordable fresh food in underserved communities. Our particular focus for our pop-up markets is the Austin community. But but we're more than just a food retailer, as we're committed to bringing equity to the Austin community through health education, employment opportunities, and really contributing to the built environment. And so we believe that our communities deserve this effort, that they deserve the level of resources, both people-wise and time-wise and money-wise, and they deserve the investment so that all residents can thrive where they live. We find it unacceptable that people have to take 2 or 3 buses to get basic goods and services, and we are looking to change that norm. So how did we start? We started with pop-up markets. We launched our first pop-up market on January 20th of 2018. And we were able to get space in Sankofa Cultural Arts and Business Center on Chicago Avenue in the Austin community. And we brought in, as you can see, there's cases of produce behind the cars. We had some issues with a van that day, so we wound up having to transport everything in cars and basically set it up on some tables with paper price signs and put a sign out front. We'd already done some advertising and flyer promotion and opened the space up to see who would come in and shop. It wasn't pretty, as you could see. It's not pretty at all, but this is how we started. This was roughly a $3,000 investment, personal investment on my part to kick this business off. You can see the baskets, you can see like the wicker baskets for display, and you can see a red shopping basket on the floor there. I purchased a lot of things secondhand, so Craigslist was my friend. A grocery liquidator or a retail liquidator. I went there to get certain supplies. I found a retail grade scale and used that to weigh people out. Yeah, so we kind of started with something with minimal overhead. I had no employees. The person you see in the picture is my sorority sister, Ari, and I just had friends who were willing to help a sister out for a day. And I needed a lot of help that day. So as you can see, some people came to shop. There was a lot of food. There was so much I didn't know. I didn't know anything about inventory management, because as you can see, there's a whole lot of food. We did not sell through all that food in one day. And I remember sitting there at Sankofa at 1 p.m. after the market had closed. They have an event coming in, I think at 2 or 2:30, and we have to get all this food out of there. And I have no place for it to go. I have no clue what I'm going to do with all this, because I never considered what happens if you don't sell through all this. And we were calling pantries to try to donate it. And it was a Saturday, so a lot of them were closed. They weren't able to take donations. Thankfully, we started in January, and there's no refrigeration like Chicago winter. So it wound up just getting stored in vehicles and on my on my front balcony. And then I just had to figure out what to do with all this food, whether I was going to donate it, if I was able to sell more of it to try to recoup some of my funds. But I would say that this was the right time to learn those hard lessons. This was the right time to make those mistakes, because relatively speaking, the investment was much lower than if I had, rented a building, bought refrigeration, hired people, gotten a POS system in. This was the time to find out that I didn't know what I didn't know. But you get better over time. You test things out, you iterate. So in one of these pictures, you can see there's a market that we had that's full of people, and we almost sold out that day. I started learning that I couldn't do one market. I might have to do 3 markets. So I'd find more locations at which to sell, so I could sell through product. I got better at marketing. I got better at telling people what I was doing so that they could, and taking the help that was offered. We were really good at getting the word out and gaining traction in terms of, it went from me knocking on doors and asking for space to people calling and saying, hey, I heard you do these markets. Will you do them in my town? Will you do them in my community center? Or would you do one at my church? And so it didn't take long for that to happen, because when you're impacting something as big as food access, word spreads. It definitely spreads. So even though we were growing, there were still challenges, and there's challenges when you start small, because you don't have a huge budget. So were there customers? Yeah, we had a few. I would say the most we ever had at a market was maybe 100 customers, but we averaged between like 30 and 50. In summer of 2018, I did a retail pilot at the Boombox, which is these big shipping containers, probably about 500 square foot shipping containers that, no, probably 200 square feet. They're not 500 square feet. They're probably about 200 square foot shipping containers that are converted into pop-up retail space. So we rented one out for a month at the corner of Chicago Avenue and Mayfield. And nobody came. We were right near a bus stop and we still had very low foot traffic. I learned a lot that month about people's shopping habits. And I learned that month that if you build it, that doesn't mean that they will come. I realized very quickly that I didn't know my customers. And so I had to learn how to reach my customers. I realized very quickly that people weren't using us for their primary produce shopping trip. They were only picking up 1 or 2 things at a time. And learning that helped me change the model for what I wanted my full-time store to be. And then also I learned that summer about controlling labor costs. So starting small really allowed me to learn some of these big lessons that I mentioned in the earlier slides that were the barriers to establishing and building and sustaining food retail. I faced those challenges early, where the risk of failure was much smaller because there was a much smaller capital investment at that time. Now, at first glance, I think that those early struggles would have told some people, oh, this means there's no market. This means, people don't want fresh food. This means that you can't do it. Just, scrap the idea and move on. Because it looked like, if you're not getting enough shoppers, if you're not selling out, then it would tell you, on first glance, hey, there's not enough demand, so you can't sustain a neighborhood store. And you could say why, and people will tell you, oh, well, look at those median income numbers, or that number of people living under poverty. People can't afford healthier food options, and that's why they're not buying them, or that people are satisfied with the present options. But something about that didn't make sense to me, and I'll tell you why. Every time I went to a community meeting, a grocery store was something that was always brought up. It was always brought up, why don't we have fresh food? People were saying over and over, this is something we want. And so it was up to me to find out that disconnect between what people said they wanted and what I was doing, and why they weren't meeting each other. And I looked deeper. I did more research. First, I researched what's going on in urban areas when it comes to food. And nationally, I found 21 billion in unmet retail demand in quote unquote inner cities. Looking at information from the Reinvestment Fund, they had done a study on retail leakage. And it shows that in the South Austin neighborhood and the 60644 zip code, they see $90 million annually in grocery retail leakage. Well, let's do the numbers. If a big store has to do $400,000 a week to be sustainable, and there's 52 weeks a year, that's probably about a $20 million a year store. So there's enough leakage in the neighborhood of grocery dollars being spent elsewhere to sustain 4 of those big stores. So how many smaller different models could possibly fit in this neighborhood sustainably just off the money that escapes alone? Also, low-income communities have money. This idea that because a community has a lower median income means that there's no disposable income there is false. In communities with higher population density, like in Austin, there's actually more spending power per square mile than there is in more affluent suburbs where people are more spread out. You're putting more buying power, packing more buying power per inch because people live closer together. Also, instead of looking at that median income number, I started looking at the distribution of where households were falling. So 40% fall below $25,000 a year. What I also found was that over 30% of households fall at $50,000 a year or more, meaning that they're likely not qualifying for SNAP, that they probably do have disposable income that they are spending regularly on food for their household. So then if I could see that the money is there, then it's my job to figure out how to get people to spend it with me. And I think that what we have to do is rethink what this word of profitable means and how you get to a sustainable business. And for some major chains, they won't say this, but some of their few city stores in working class Black neighborhoods are actually more profitable than their suburban stores. The key to kind of unlocking this question of how do we make this work is flexibility. 40 Acres started with a lot of room for flexibility to shift, to change. We started with pop-up markets. Eventually we added delivery service. And now that delivery service has boomed since the pandemic, but we found different ways to reach our customers. And I think that's critical in the beginning when you don't have a lot of overhead. If you're able to start a food business with less overhead and more flexibility built into it, then you can absolutely find those new models. And it could be micro retail, like really small shops. It could be a hub and spoke model where you bring food to a hub and then people come and get it. Or you have a place that's a hub with different business models running out of it. It could be mobile markets like the Fresh Moves bus. Also, community engagement is critical. When a community has been disinvested from a long time, it takes a while to gain trust for people and residents to believe that something good is coming to my neighborhood, something good is going to stay in my neighborhood, and I won't be disappointed if I invest my time, my energy, and my money in patronizing them. It won't be taken away from me if I get used to it and like it. And then just being consistent. One of the biggest things that has benefited 40 Acres is we started getting more customers, particularly in Austin, when we were there more. When we were there with markets, when we were there with produce stands, the more we were there, the more people saw us, the more people were able to invest and believe in us. So I kind of want to cut it there. I'm going to stop sharing. And we are at, yep, perfect. I did like the 30 minutes that I said. And I want to open it up for questions.
Perfect. So we already have a question in Hova, actually. The question from Shirley is, How do you get cooler equipment to put more fruits and vegetables into corner stores?
That is an excellent question. So one, you have to actually first get the permission of the corner store to put that refrigeration in. They have to have the right plumbing because there has to be a place for the water to condense to. They also have to have the correct electrical load to be able to handle that type of cooler. So the first kind of starts with the store and their willingness to bring it in, and if they have the infrastructure to bring it in. And if they don't have the infrastructure to bring it in, are they willing to do the modifications necessary? The great thing about the city of Chicago is that there is funding out there. There is SBIF funding. There is Neighborhood Opportunity Fund funding. So right now the city is hugely focused on food access. So if there was a corner store who was willing, but it's just like, we don't have the money, there are avenues even through the city for funding to get a project like that off the ground. And it would cover the upgrade to electrical, the upgrade to plumbing, or at least it would cover 50% of the cost of that, 50 to 75% of the cost of that, and even the equipment. So I think, yeah, it starts with the store and then developing a plan for how you're gonna fund it. And then also, once you get that refrigeration cooler for fresh fruits and vegetables in there, it's also getting people in that store to shop for fresh fruits and vegetables in that store. I think with a lot of our corner stores, there's a perception that they aren't even the kind of place that you want to buy fruits and vegetables at. So you have to reverse that thinking that I cannot buy this product here. And if I bought it here, it would not be of good quality. So there's also that customer barrier of reframing how they think about what this store sells and if it's quality. Okay, I see a question. You mentioned how 40 acres will provide health education and employment opportunities. Can you discuss other opportunities that grocery stores can provide for community beyond food access? I love this. Okay, so on its face, a grocery store is all about food access, but it goes so much deeper than that. A grocery store is part of a neighborhood's built environment. So there is opportunity to enhance the neighborhood's architecture through your store design. There is opportunity to create a space where it's not just the utilitarian purpose of buying groceries. It's also a place where you run into your neighbors. I tell this story all the time. One of my first jobs in high school was as a bagger at my local grocery store in upstate New York. And I was 17 years old. It was my senior year of high school. And the front end was basically employed by a bunch of high school and early college students. And so there was a party on a Friday night, and we all went to this college student's house and hung out. And a lot of underage drinking was occurring. And I got, yeah, exactly. And so the next morning I had to go to work. We all had to go to work and we were all hungover and feeling like crap. And I remember running into my 11th grade AP US history teacher in one of the aisles when I am restocking the groceries and I'm trying not to throw up on her shoes because I am that nauseous. And I think that every kid should have that experience of being hungover at work and running into their teacher or their neighbor or their aunt in the grocery store aisle. It's a place that is a natural social gathering place that builds neighborhood bonds and neighborhood cohesion so people know each other. Grocery stores are also anchors for other businesses because it is a business that people will use over and over and over again, multiple times in a month, sometimes multiple times in a week. A good grocery store creates foot traffic, and other retail wants to congregate near that foot traffic so that they can get some of it. And it becomes this virtuistic symbiotic, virtuistic, is that the word? Symbiotic relationship between these businesses as retail starts to cluster together. And so a grocery store is that anchor that often brings that. A grocery store can also help improve home values in the nearby half-mile radius, because now you're saying, not only do I have this beautiful home, but you have a really important good and service that's within walking distance of the home. That increases your home value. Those, if you've ever been on Redfin or Zillow, there's walk scores in a neighborhood, and that tells you not just if there's sidewalks, but how close are you to regular goods and services. So you may not even need a car. You can get everything you need a couple blocks from your home. So grocery stores offer far more than just food access and jobs. They really become part of the lifeblood of a community. Okay, and then there's another question about, have I explored selling produce supplied by Black farmers in the region? Yes, I have. So we actually, in the summertime, in the growing season, this past summer, we were selling produce grown at Finding Justice Garden. He is Artema Plunkett is a Austin-based farmer, and he farms on the south side, lives on Austin, and grows amazing greens. And so we bought a lot of our greens from him this summer. I will say that it has been a slightly difficult outside of Chicago, like regionally, to get food from regional farmers, more so just like because of access to technology and putting out emails or phone calls and not necessarily getting a response, or just being hard to connect. But here in Chicago, there's a pretty decent Black urban farm food ecosystem that we have drawn from and will continue to draw from. However, I will say this, that with food justice, there's two sides of it. There is justice on the supply side and justice on the demand side. Demand side is really about location, like, is food accessible in this neighborhood? Like, can people reach it? It's about pricing, is it affordable? And it's finally about methods of payment accepted. If I can afford it, can you accept the way that I can afford it? 40 acres comes down firmly in this side of food justice. We are all about the demand side. Now, the supply side is different. The supply side is very highly tied to environmentalism and the labor movement. So that's, are we growing food? Are we raising food? Are we catching food in sustainable ways that does not permanently harm the environment? Are we paying labor for the value that they are creating? And so on this supply side, if we're really focused on sustainable growing practices, if we're really focused on paying people what it's worth to grow and supply our food, food becomes more expensive. So what you often see is, I mean, have you ever been to a farmer's market, let's say in Lincoln Park or Logan Square, you're buying kale for like $3 a bunch, because you're paying that farmer a fair wage for the work they put in to grow, to harvest, to bring that to market. At the grocery store, you might never pay more than 99 cents a pound for kale, depending on what store you're going to. And so oftentimes food justice on the supply side is going this way, while food justice on the demand side is going that way, and they don't necessarily always meet. And so because we are so very focused on affordability, most of our food is conventionally grown. Most of our food we buy through wholesalers who likely are buying through large commercial agribusiness. But when we can, we do try to bring that back into we try to bring our supply back to the local market. But our focus and our target is always making sure, if we're going to do that, it absolutely has to be affordable for our customer. Okay, I'm ready for another question.
There's another one in there about the Daily Table. Do you know much about the Daily Table, founded by Trader Joe's former CEO? And do you have thoughts on that model, which includes getting a lot of food at lower prices from other grocery stores when it's about to go bad, but after, or good, before it's about to go bad, essentially, and then they like repurpose it and sell it for a very discounted price?
Yeah, so I was not familiar with that until just now. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. We typically don't buy from other grocery stores, and we don't do that kind of secondhand model. We're able to keep our food prices low because we talked about this. I talked about this in my presentation, this area of expertise. Well, buying food is an area of expertise that I've spent the last 3 years developing. I have cultivated a network of suppliers. So, for example, I'll use the example of grapes. Grapes are expensive right now. Grapes are costing anywhere from $28 to $40 a case for an 18-pound case, meaning that I'm buying them at over $2 a pound, meaning I'm gonna have to sell grapes at over $3 a pound. I don't wanna do that. Sometimes I can find a supplier who just so happened to have gotten dumped with 80 cases of grapes that are perfectly good, but they're just a little too small for retail. And he'll sell those to me at $18 a case. I've become very good at finding those deals. And I've also become very good at just, with the model we have, currently being able to say, no, I'm just not going to carry that right now. People can buy something else. It's too expensive. And so kind of knowing when to say yes, when to say no, when and how to look for deals. And that's how we've been able to keep our pricing very competitive with bigger name grocers, while also maintaining standard grocery markups for produce. So we don't cut our margins, we don't cut our markup to be low priced. We just try to buy really, really well.
And then another question regarding delivery: was delivery so important even before COVID because fewer folks have cars in Austin compared to, for example, a Lincoln Park?
Yeah, so actually delivery was really huge for our food service customers. So small caterers, chefs, small restaurants. Food access is an issue for that smaller player in the restaurant and food service industry too. Because the time it takes to source and buy and find every ingredient and make sure you're buying in the right quantities, it just takes a ton of time. And so they liked buying from 40 Acres because our pricing was on. They had the flexibility of buying by the case or by the unit. So most of our deliveries were actually going out to that segment of customers. We didn't have a lot of residential customers before the pandemic. We had just released our produce box subscription program, I think in January of 2020. Before the pandemic, I think we had seven, maybe 9, 10 subscribers. And by May of 2020, we were up to over 100 subscribers because of the pandemic. So I tried to push the delivery business prior to the pandemic. Nobody was really feeling it. Nobody was like, a few people would order. We had a couple of regular, maybe once a month customers. A good week on delivery before would have been 7 residential customers. And I would get really excited to see that many. At the height of pandemic, we were seeing over 200 delivery orders going out every single week. And now we're averaging between like 150 and 165 every week. So there's been some drop off since the pandemic. It dropped off much further in the summer and fall, but has rebounded, and we've been able to retain that customer base from that like customer growth from a much more natural base than the spike we got, due to the pandemic. I see the question. Okay, I'll let you manage the questions that way.
Oh no, it's good. I just want to make sure you see it. Oh, okay. Are there plans to sell items beyond fresh produce 2 questions.
Absolutely. Yes. So here is what I'm going to say, and this is what I kind of wanted to get into. Our communities need not just fresh fruits and vegetables. Obviously, they're like such a good foundation for a healthy diet. When you put those in, there's just less room for the bad stuff. And also the environmental impact of eating plant-based. The more plants you eat, the less ethane you're putting in the air through, big cattle farms and things like that. So I'm not personally vegan, but I understand the benefits of a plant-based diet. However, I still understand that my customer wants and needs other categories. They want meat, they want dry goods, they want refrigerated and frozen. And so in our store, we intend to scale to carry all of those when we have a store. However, just to start a business, produce is the easiest thing to start with, especially in the city of Chicago. First, as I said, Chicago has an excellent wholesale ecosystem for produce. There are so many different suppliers. You have small farms, you have wholesalers, you have large wholesalers. Hell, if you wanted to go into Pete's right now and buy a case of green beans, they would let you. You can get better pricing elsewhere, but you can do that. So there's just a really great ecosystem for buying food. After that, in addition to that, it's one of the easiest licenses to get in the city. And there's not a health inspection check every 6 months or even ever. A mobile produce license, it's 2 years. It costs like $150 or $175. So it's a really low barrier to entry to start even just like a basic produce stand somewhere. So this was like the best point of entry for us. And because produce tends to be a destination category in a store, people go to stores because they have great produce or they have really cheap produce. I don't know if anybody remembers the store called Stanley's. It was on North and Elston. And I mean, the quality could be hit or miss sometimes. Like sometimes you had to eat that within like 2 days, but it was so cheap. And actually they were kind of like a lot of the inspiration for 40 Acres. But that was the destination. I would pass by 2 other grocery stores just to go to Stanley's because of produce. So starting my business and focusing on produce was easy from a supply standpoint, from a licensing standpoint, and then also it builds my business around something that will be a destination for a permanent store anyway.
And then also, how do you continue learning about what customers want and need?
So one of the ways we do that is first, you have to get your customers' information. So we've been really good about collecting emails. So whenever somebody orders delivery, we get their email. We give people the option to opt into our newsletter. Once you can communicate with your customer, you can start asking them questions. And also customers will tell you when they don't like something. So you learn very quickly when you've done something wrong or when you need to change something. But we just continuously ask. We get their information and then we keep in contact. And we ask them things like, how did you find us? Because we want to tailor our marketing better. If people aren't responding to flyers and we're spending hundreds of dollars to put flyers out there, that may not be the best investment. If people are saying, hey, I want more organic options, and we have enough customers telling us this, that might be a chance for us to offer an all organic produce box, because we finally found that there are enough people clamoring for this that if we brought this product in, we could sell through it. It's people telling us, how do I shop? Do I go in my car? Do I walk? Do I take a bike? Do I take the bus? All of these things about our customers' habits and expectations and wants, we just simply ask or don't ask, and they communicate to us. So we're constantly learning. And then also we've been very blessed to be able to get people interested in what we're doing. So a lot of academic institutions have, you know, asked us to be part of class projects where their students will do research for us. So we ask them like, hey, we want to know what, we often want to know people who aren't our customers. Have they heard of us? If they have heard of us, are they shopping with us? If they're not shopping with us, why? What do people want? And so we've gotten some really great data and research from partnering with academic institutions so that their students can learn while our business gets a value from their learning.
And then another question that was accidentally sent to me instead of the whole chat asks, how do you balance that food justice from the demand versus supply side with the toxicity due to pesticides that is often associated with conventionally grown produce, which are often attributed with cancer and other chronic diseases?
So I will say this, and our general manager says this all the time, wash your produce really good. A majority of pesticides and stuff can be, you know, washed off with, you know, just produce cleansing products. How do I put this? And it's just going to be what it is. We can't impact everything. I would love to. I don't have the capacity to. So I've had to make choices on what I want to impact and what I'm willing to sacrifice on or pay less attention to in order to do that. So I will admit that, you know, we are not the most I'm not out front talking about like the harmfulness of, you know, GMOs and pesticides. I understand that. And like I said, when I can, I do offer organic options. Although I will say this, that the USDA organic certification is really a money grab. There are plenty of smaller growers who use sustainable practices, who aren't using chemical pesticides, use natural pesticides, that don't have that USDA label because they just can't afford to go through that process and they can't afford to keep it. So we'll often buy from them just because they have like sustainable growing practices, and that's good enough for us. So it's also a matter of like just educating people on like what they're getting and what they're paying for. And I would rather pay more to buy from a small farmer who does not have the USDA organic certification than to buy from a large grower who's able to afford that. And you just, you know, you get the labeling on the package.
So I think so far that was it for questions posed in the chat, but forget it. In the beginning, you started with personal investment. Could you talk more about how you're funding your pop-ups or plan to fund permanent infrastructure and future growth? And also feel free to ping more questions into the chat. We still have some time.
Yeah, I think we've had the 20 minutes, so let's fill this up, guys. I started with personal investment. And then since then, our business has been 100% funded through grants. I will tell you this, we are not a nonprofit organization, not even a little, not even at all. And timing is everything. And I think one of the reasons I wanted to have this talk is because we are at a moment where we weren't even at when I started in 2018, where all of a sudden, there are funders that want to invest in food access in Black communities and that are willing to make those investments in not just nonprofit organizations, but also for-profit commercial businesses, because they see that impact is not the sole domain of one sector. So the first grant that I got was through the University of Chicago, which we saw in my introduction. I'm an alum, and the business school has I don't think they've done it since, had this program called the Adventure Capital Challenge. And what it was a 5-figure grant for an alum could apply for, and they pick maybe 2 or 3 alums every year to go out and explore a nascent career interest. Go play, go explore. So there was somebody who wanted to learn woodworking, and they gave her a grant to take woodworking classes, and she built like all the furniture for her house with this funding. I applied back in 2017 with the idea that I was going to build a whole ass grocery store on $20,000. Thankfully, they rejected me that year because I had no clue what the hell I was talking about. But the next year, they had the program again, and I had been running 40 acres for about 5 months at that time, so I had some experience. So I knew specifically what I wanted to ask for, how I was going to use the funding. And I wanted to use it to do that like short-term retail pilot. And so I wound up doing the pilot first and then finding out that I got the money. So it was kind of retroactive, but that's how I funded probably the next 6 to 12 months of our business. No, probably the next 6 to 12 months of the business. And then in late 2018, early 2019, the Reinvestment Fund came out with this Healthy Food Financing Initiative grant. And it was open to nonprofits, government entities, partnerships, and for-profit retail businesses. And it was all about increasing food access, retail food access in underserved neighborhoods. And so I was like, oh my God, that's me. I found a community partner in Westside Health Authority, and we came up with a 2-year plan, which we're now in year 3 of, to scale the pop-up markets to a brick and mortar store. And we applied with that plan and funding for each piece of it. And we were awarded $185,000 through that grant. After that, the American Heart Association came out with a social impact fund grant, and it was focused on the social determinants of health. And one of the social determinants of health that they said they were focused on was food access. And it was open to small businesses. And because they were open to small businesses, I applied and I got it. And another Black-owned small business that focuses on food access called Sweet Potato Patch, they primarily operate on the South Side, they got it too here in Chicago. And so what started happening is that, like I said, entities started setting aside money to invest in this food access space. And many of these entities opened up that funding to small business or to startups that were impacting this, social enterprises. So if this is an area you're interested in, like this type of funding is only getting more and more common. I don't know how long this moment will last, but if we're going to start slow and build, like now is the time to, spend $150, get a mobile produce license, find somebody that'll let you do a produce stand in front of their building, and, see what happens. Learn your customer, build from scratch, learn the supply chain, get some suppliers. And once you have, it only took us having maybe 5 to 6 months of experience under our belt before I was able to intelligently articulate what I needed as a business owner in order to scale to the next step. So when I first started, I'm gonna show you guys something because we're in my apartment. Ignore how messy it is, but follow me. If you can see these down here, these are mini fridges. Before I had a refrigerated storage space, I had bought 3 mini fridges from Craigslist to store like leftover cases of food between markets so that I could keep my food fresher longer. I could continue to deliver it. I still have them in here. I haven't even gotten rid of them. So I just wanted to show you that to show like there's a lot of resourcefulness in this space, and you can kind of like piecemeal the things you need together until you gain the experience, gain some traction, gain some knowledge where you can then go to a funder and say, I've gotten myself this far. I'm applying for $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 to get me this much further. And then also funding follows funding. Once you get your first funder, use that to get your next one, because you can say, hey, I received funding. I received because I received $15,000 from the University of Chicago. I damn sure put that in my HFFI, Healthy Food Financing Initiative grant, the next grant I got, and they gave me $185,000. So it may not all be grants. It could be you're looking for an investor. It could be you're looking for, a silent partner or some type of investment, and you can show them that, like, look, I figured something out that can get you a return on your investment. It could be a low interest small business loan, but just coming in and starting small and getting that traction makes it a little bit easier to unlock funding. And we're in a time where people are looking to fund Black owned, women owned, minority owned businesses and ventures and enterprises. So you might as well take advantage of it.
And then another question we have in the chat is, what lessons are you learning from the 10-year-long struggle to fund the Auburn Gresham 32 million project? And how do you think their experience can help you make the most of funder interest in your business and Austin?
So I think that, aren't they funding like a whole commercial and it's like mixed use. It's like commercial and residential, and there's supposed to be a grocery store going in there. I believe that there was neighborhood if this is the same one I'm thinking about, I believe that there was a neighborhood opportunity fund grant that was received. I think that, was it Auburn Gresham or was it South Chicago that won the Chicago prize? I don't remember. So there was some funding for that. But I will say that any kind of development project, once you start going into the millions, it can take years before all of the funding is together. And then you have to keep all of the pieces of the project together. So you have to keep your developer engaged. You have to keep your architect, your general contractor, and you have to keep the space. And if you're holding space for years, that's holding costs. You're still paying, you could potentially be paying property taxes on it or rent, and you're not getting anything out of it. So you need money not just to do the project, but to hold on to the elements of the project while you're putting everything together. So I don't know particularly about that struggle, but I do know that since we've only had our building for 4 or 5 months, and it has been a huge challenge because like costs keep coming up and we're like, can we make money on the building while we're preparing it for development? Like, how do we make our way to ground break and open with limited funding and keeping all of these moving parts together and without losing funding that has been committed already because we just haven't gotten to the stage where we need to be to use it. So there's all these moving pieces to it that we have to be very, very mindful of. So you want to move, it's a matter of moving expeditiously, but also moving smart so that you don't spend all this money just to have issues when you open that could have been solved if you had just slowed down a little bit in the development.
So I don't see any other questions in the chat. Feel free to like kind of last call for any other questions. But I also have another question for you.
Okay.
I've been just like a huge admirer of cooperatives, and there are like some really cool Black cooperative grocery stores out there, like the Mandela one in Oakland. Just wondering, did you ever think of like a cooperative model, or like maybe think about like using any of like, I know they all have different values, but any of the values when like shaping your own business model? Just wondering about like that whole idea of like cooperative economics.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, I have, okay. So initially I've heard of Mandela Co-op. I had heard of co-ops. When I first started showing up in Austin, I first started showing up in Austin. There was another group that was Austin Community Food Co-op. They're still in existence. They are getting their planning committee together. So if you're interested, sign up for their planning committee. They need you. They need your brain power, your ideas, your creativity, your skills. Sign up to join the planning committee for the Austin Community Food Co-op. I'll admit, like I said, I went to business school. So like I came from a more like, and I came from corporate. So it was like, if you have an idea, just go move. And so that was kind of my, that was my mantra. I think when I first started, was just like fail fast, move fast, test and iterate, blah, blah, blah. And I think what I took from the co-op movement was this need to slow down, was this need to engage others in the journey with me. So it wasn't necessarily the ownership model, but there was this sense that like I wasn't doing something right because I had this great idea, I thought, that I heard people say they need, and yet like people were like, that's nice, little girl, like, but nobody was really like supporting. And I'm like, I'm not engaging. I'm basically talking at people and telling them what I'm going to do. And I'm not really bringing them along with me. I think that in time, one model that I really like is Woodman's. Woodman's started out family owned and they eventually turned into a worker co-op. So I think that like, if in the future 40 acres grows and I'm just like, look, I don't want to own this whole thing. This is not how I want to continue. I want to kind of transfer the ownership. I would consider like an employee owned model for sure.
Thanks for that. And then we did get another question. Is your work in Austin attracting interest from folks pursuing broader food-based community development initiatives?
Could you be more specific? So like in terms like what kind of interest are?
Bob, Hugh, are you still on the line? Feel free to unmute if you want to elaborate or type into the chat.
Hi. Yeah, Liz, I'm referring to just food-based community development projects throughout Austin. I mean, there's always all these interests. You spoke earlier about the variety of needs, the cross-sector approach. Just wondering, how is your little point of light? What kind of illumination is happening there in Austin because of that?
Yeah, so I think one, what has come of it is there's been more funding towards Austin. This year, the Christopher Family Foundation with the Lumpkin Foundation and the Builders Initiative created this Austin Fresh grant. It is just for nonprofits, but one of our nonprofit partners who is working with us on the store project was able to receive a large amount of money for this grant that's going to go towards refurbishing and renovating the building that 40 Acres is going to be renting for our space. So I think it's attracted more funding. It's attracted more attention. There's food businesses opening up. And I can't say that they're opening up because of 40 Acres, but I think that they're sensing a better ecosystem, especially along the Chicago Avenue corridor. So Schweet's Cheesecake is there. I'm not going to make an announcement for her, but one of my favorite caterers is opening up a spot on Chicago Avenue. There are some other smaller restaurants because food access is not simply about grocery stores. It's about grocery. It's about those quick service restaurants where you can get like not a bland salad, but like this really amazing bowl. Like think of Freshie. Like you go into Freshie and you get like a waka bowl and it's absolutely delicious. It's fast, but it's healthy. It's about farmers markets. So one of the things DCASE is doing and they've been doing is funding markets in the Austin community. And now this year they're finally they were doing 3 markets at one point in time and none of them were really well attended. And now they're taking all of that and they're focusing that funding on one of the markets and using that market as an incubator to build a real farmers market for Austin that can eventually have the training wheels taken off and an organization like probably the Austin Chamber of Commerce can actually run that and it can run off its own revenue through booth rents. And, people will pay, $50, $70, $5 to rent a booth for a day there because there's hundreds of people coming through buying and they'll make that money back, easily. But you have to build the infrastructure and the muscle for that. And I think that 40 Acres helped put a spotlight on different ways to do that.
Well, we only have 4 minutes left, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But if you all do have any other questions that maybe weren't answered today, the Hova platform actually will be available for the next 4 months. So if you need a process and then maybe have some other questions, feel free to ping them in there and we can get them over to Liz. Liz, I don't know if you have any closing remarks, but thank you so much. Oh, we're already getting the thanks in the chat, but this was amazing. So thank you.
I'm so happy to do this. I hope that everyone got something out of this. Anything, I guess I want to know, like, did anything stand out, or is there anything do you guys have any ideas that you're thinking about for commercial food ventures in, it could be the west side, south side, suburbs, anything? Well, even if you don't, that's cool. Monica, okay. Awesome sauce. Well, I really appreciate you guys kind of sitting in and listening and participating. Your questions were awesome. If you want to follow 40 Acres Fresh Market, we are on Instagram at 40 Acres Fresh Market. It's the word 40. If you look at my shirt, this is what it looks like. So if you just want to follow at 40 Acres Fresh Market on IG, if you kind of want to check out what we do, feel free to order a produce box online. We deliver to the city of Chicago, as well as the Western I-290 suburbs, all the way up to Westchester. Yeah, let's go get Austin a grocery store together.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So everyone, feel free to rate the session. You can find that in Hova, and also participate in the survey section where you can provide more feedback about everything. Again, thank you so much, Liz.
Thanks, guys.